I never thought a simple dinner with my daughter would feel like walking into a storm. The restaurant was one of her favorites. Warm lights glowing against polished wood, the low hum of conversations filling the air. For years, it had been our safe place. Whenever life turned cruel, we came here, father and daughter, to patch over the cracks in silence or laughter. But tonight, there was something different in the way she avoided my eyes. Her hands traced the rim of her glass as though her thoughts were elsewhere. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but a father knows when distance has grown into something darker. "Are you not going to eat, Dad?" she asked, her voice light, almost rehearsed. I smiled faintly. "I'm just watching you. You remind me so much of your mother when you sit like that." Her face stiffened. She didn't like talking about her mother anymore. I could see the impatience, the walls she had built over the years. Perhaps it was my fault. Perhaps I had failed her in ways I refused to admit. Still, I had come here tonight hoping to bridge the gap. I told myself, one evening together, one good meal, maybe that's all we need to start over. The waiter brought our drinks, her favorite red wine, my usual glass of orange juice. She lifted her glass, offering a toast I didn't expect. "To new beginnings," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, forcing a smile, but the words hung heavy in the air. New beginnings? Why did it sound like an ending? Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression shifting, and then stood up. "I'll be right back, Dad," she said, sliding her bag over her shoulder. "Just a quick call." I nodded, though unease gnawed at me. Watching her walk away, I felt the emptiness of the table spread around me like a shadow. That was when he appeared, an older man in a security guard's uniform, face etched with lines of duty and suspicion. He leaned close, his voice a low murmur meant only for me. "Sir," he said, glancing toward the direction my daughter had gone. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but I saw him pour something into your juice." My throat tightened. "What did you just say?" The guard's eyes flickered with urgency. "The man she was with earlier, before she sat down, he slipped something into your drink." I looked down at my glass, the faint condensation sliding slowly down the side, the liquid inside glowing harmlessly under the light. My pulse quickened. My mind raced. The man she was with earlier? My daughter hadn't mentioned meeting anyone. She hadn't mentioned anyone at all. I lifted the glass slightly, and a sick realization struck me like lightning. Because without even thinking, without suspecting a thing, I had already taken a sip. The father feels the first wave of dizziness, unsure whether the poison is already working, or whether he can survive long enough to discover who's behind it. A bitter sting clung to the back of my throat. At first I told myself it was nerves, imagination, or the acidity of the orange juice. But then the heaviness came, slow, creeping, like invisible hands pressing against my chest. My fingers trembled as I set the glass down, careful not to let the guard see the fear tightening my grip. The restaurant noise blurred, plates clattering and laughter ringing distant, as though I were listening from underwater. "Sir," the guard whispered urgently, "we should get you out of here. Now." I glanced toward the hallway where my daughter had disappeared. My heart screamed to wait for her, but the guard's eyes carried the weight of experience. He wasn't guessing. He knew. I can't leave her," I muttered, struggling to steady my voice. The guard leaned closer, his jaw tightening. "If you don't move now, you might not live to see her again." Those words snapped through me like a whip. He slipped a strong arm under mine, guiding me discreetly through the side entrance, away from curious eyes and polite smiles. The cold night air hit me, sharp and merciless. I gasped as if breaking free from invisible chains. "Sit," the guard ordered, lowering me onto a bench near the alley behind the restaurant. He pulled a small bottle of water from his belt, pressing it into my hand. "Sip this. Whatever's in your system, We need to dilute it until help arrives. I obeyed, though my throat resisted, clenching with each swallow. My mind, however, was somewhere else entirely, flashing back to the guard's words, the man she was with earlier. Earlier? When? Where? Why hadn't she told me? "Who was he?" I asked, my voice rasping. The guard hesitated, scanning the shadows. "Tall, well-dressed. He sat with her before you arrived. I thought he was family." Family. The word twisted like a knife. My daughter had walked in with him, then left him behind when... She sat with me? Or was he hiding, watching? And if she knew about him, why would she let him near me? My chest tightened again, and I clenched the bench for balance. No, don't collapse yet. Not until I know the truth. The guard crouched in front of me, his gaze steady. "Sir, do you have enemies? Someone who'd want you gone?" I gave a bitter laugh that tasted more like ash. When there's money involved, everyone's a suspect. And then, as though summoned by my suspicion, a memory jolted through me. A week ago, I had caught a fleeting glimpse of a man leaving my driveway, adjusting his cufflinks as though he owned the place. My daughter had been at home that night. She had dismissed it as a delivery driver who asked for directions. But the cologne, the sharp, expensive scent, was the same one I faintly recognized when she leaned over the table tonight. My stomach turned, and not just from the poison. Could she have known? Could she have been part of this? The sound of heels clicking against the pavement snapped my thoughts. My daughter emerged from the restaurant's side door, her phone clutched in hand. She froze when she saw the guard supporting me. Her face paled. "Dad? What happened?" she asked, rushing forward. Her voice trembled, but whether with fear or guilt I couldn't yet tell. I opened my mouth to answer, but the bitterness surged again, and this time I couldn't hold it back. I doubled over, coughing hard, the world tilting dangerously around me. Her hands clamped onto my shoulders, desperate, but all I could see, fading, narrowing, was that faint trace of cologne. The same scent I remembered from the shadow at my house. As consciousness flickers, the father realizes the mysterious man is no stranger. He has seen him before in connection with his daughter. The world came back in fragments, shapes, sounds, and a pounding rhythm inside my skull. I opened my eyes to the dim glow of a hospital room. The sterile scent of antiseptic was the first thing that greeted me, followed by the steady beeping of a heart monitor. For a moment, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten here. Then the memory surged back. The guard, the poisoned drink, my daughter's pale face hovering over me as the darkness pulled me under. She was sitting by the bed now, hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on the floor. When she noticed I was awake, she straightened quickly. "Dad," she whispered, relief flooding her voice. "You scared me half to death. They said it was food poisoning, but are you feeling better?" Food poisoning. My lips twitched at the convenient diagnosis. Either she didn't know the truth or she was playing a role. I forced a nod. "Better than before. How long was I out?" "Just a few hours. The doctors say you're stable." She hesitated, then added softly, "I was so worried." Her words might have carried weight once, but now they felt hollow. I watched her closely, studying every flicker of her expression. There was fear there, yes, but also something she was trying hard to bury. The door opened, and a nurse came in to check my vitals. My daughter stepped aside, pacing near the window. When the nurse left, silence hung heavy between us until I broke it. "Who was the man?" I asked. Her head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. "What man?" "The one you met before dinner?" I said, keeping my voice even. The security guard saw him. Tall, well-dressed. He was with you. For a split second, panic flickered in her eyes, quickly smothered by defiance. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. You must have been..." confused. The doctor said the toxins can cause hallucinations. Hallucinations. Convenient again. I wanted to believe Hall, ear denial. But the image in my head was too sharp. The man outside my house, adjusting his cufflinks. The faint cologne clinging to her clothes tonight. I leaned back against the pillows, pretending to accept her lie. Maybe you're right. Maybe I imagined it. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly, and that was when I knew. There was a man. Later, when she stepped out to answer a call, I pulled the hospital blanket tighter around me, closing my eyes as if sleeping. The hallway carried her muffled voice, low and urgent. Yes, he's awake now. No, I didn't tell him. I said exactly what you told me to say. My chest constricted, not from poison this time, but from betrayal. When she came back, I kept my eyes shut, my breathing steady. She sat down quietly, unaware that I had heard everything. And in that silence, my mind replayed the fragments again. The stranger at the driveway, the cologne, the guard's warning. He wasn't just a shadow. He was real. And he wasn't just anyone. He was her fiancé. The father realizes the man is deeply tied to his daughter, but is she protecting him or protecting herself? The next morning, I insisted on being discharged from the hospital. The doctors recommended observation, but I wasn't about to let myself be caged while wolves circled outside. My daughter, oddly quiet, signed the papers for me, her eyes lingering on every line as though she were buying time. At home, the silence between us grew heavier. She made tea, fussed over me, and placed the cup carefully in front of me as though nothing had changed. But every sip felt like a gamble now, every glance a test I couldn't let her see me giving. Dad, she said finally, her tone soft but rehearsed. You really should rest. Maybe you're overthinking what happened. Sometimes our mind plays tricks when we're scared. Her words sounded like comfort, but to me they were daggers wrapped in silk. I studied her face, searching for cracks. You're right. Maybe I am paranoid. I sipped the tea slowly, watching her reaction. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Almost too calm. But inside my chest, suspicion spread like wildfire. That evening, while she was in her room, I searched her bag. My hands trembled, not just from weakness, but from the guilt of snooping through my own daughter's belongings. I told myself it was survival. What I found nearly stopped my breath. A folded receipt from an insurance company, tucked neatly inside her wallet. The policy was recent, barely a month old, and the name listed as insured was mine. Beneficiaries, my daughter and her fiancé. I sat on the edge of the bed, the paper burning in my hand. The whispers in my mind grew louder. She knew. She was part of this. She signed her name in ink that spelled my death. I slipped the receipt back before she could notice and forced myself to act normal. That night, I pretended to doze in the living room as she sat across from me scrolling on her phone. I caught her glancing at me more than once, her eyes sharp, calculating, as though she was waiting for me to fade into sleep. Finally, I broke the silence. You've been spending a lot of time with him lately, I said casually. Her fingers froze on the screen. With who? Your fiancé, I replied, watching her carefully. He seems like a charming man. She stiffened but forced a smile. Yes, he's been good to me. You'll see once you know him better. Will I? I leaned forward slightly. Because the last time I saw him, he was at our table. And I don't think he was there to keep me company. Her face drained of color, but she quickly recovered, letting out a brittle laugh. Dad, please. You really are letting your imagination get the best of you. But her voice cracked just enough for me to hear the truth behind the lie. I let the conversation die there, not pressing further. She thought she had won, that her mask still held. But deep inside, I made my decision. I would not confront her directly. Not yet. If she thought I was weak, paranoid, and blind, then I would let her keep believing it, because only then could I plan the revenge she would never see coming. Cliffhanger into Chapter 5. As the father steels himself, he hears his daughter on the phone that night whispering, "He doesn't have much time left." That night, lying awake in the dark, I heard her voice through the thin walls of the house, low, hushed, threaded with urgency. "He doesn't have much time left," she whispered. "No, he doesn't suspect. I'll make sure everything goes smoothly." I froze, staring at the ceiling, every muscle taut. He doesn't have much time left. My breath came shallow, the words cutting deeper than any knife. The next morning, I drove to my lawyer's office under the pretense of handling routine estate matters. My daughter thought I was heading for a medical checkup. I didn't correct her. Mr. Khan, my longtime lawyer, welcomed me into his office with his usual calm professionalism. But the moment I asked him to review my life insurance, his brow furrowed. "Strange," he murmured, flipping through digital files on his screen. "There was an amendment made recently. Additions to your policy." "Additions?" My voice was tight. "Yes. Your daughter and her fiancé were added as primary beneficiaries." I leaned forward. "When was this done?" "Just last month. It was submitted electronically with proper authorization." He paused, meeting my eyes. "The signatures match yours, but—" His voice trailed off, uncertain. I sat back, anger burning like fire beneath my skin. My own blood, conspiring with a man I barely knew, forging papers that sealed my death as their prophet. "Can they access it if—" I stopped myself, swallowing the bile in my throat. "If something happens to me?" "Yes. Almost immediately. A large payout." I let the silence stretch, forcing my breathing to stay calm. Mr. Khan mistook it for grief. "Sir, do you want me to revoke the policy?" "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. I want everything to remain as it is." His eyebrows lifted. "Are you sure? This could be dangerous." "I am very sure." My voice was like stone, because now I understood. This wasn't just greed. It was calculate, Tian, premeditated betrayal. And if they thought I was going to sit quietly while they sharpened the knife, they didn't know me at all. When I returned home, the house felt colder, the air thick with unspoken deception. My daughter greeted me with forced cheer. "How was the appointment?" "Good," I said smoothly. "The doctors say I'll live a long, long time." For a fleeting second, her smile faltered. Then she recovered, brushing it off as if she hadn't just revealed the cracks in her mask. That evening, as I pretended to drift off in my chair, I overheard her talking again on the phone. "Yes, the policy is in place. He trusts me. It's only a matter of time." I gripped the armrest so hard my knuckles whitened. Trust. That word, once sacred, was now a poison more potent than anything they had slipped into my drink. I stared into the shadows of the living room, and for the first time in years, I felt utterly alone. The days that followed became a theater of lies. Every movement, every word, every breath I took was a performance. If they expected a frail old man waiting for death, then that's the role I would play. I coughed more often, sometimes clutching my chest. I walked slower around the house, leaning on the banister as though it were my lifeline. I left half-eaten meals on the table, let my hands tremble deliberately when lifting a glass. And it worked. I caught my daughter watching me from the hallway, her expression a mix of concern and calculation. Once, when she thought I wasn't looking, she whispered into her phone, "He's weaker than ever." But what she didn't know was that behind the curtain of weakness, I was sharpening my strength. The first call I made was to the security guard. the man who had saved me that night. His name was Farouk. He agreed to meet me discreetly after his shift. We sat in his cramped office behind the restaurant, the buzz of the neon sign seeping through the window. "I owe you my life," I told him. "But I need more than gratitude now. I need your eyes, your memory. That man you saw, my daughter's fiancé, tell me everything." Farouk rubbed his chin. He came in early, sat with her for a few minutes. They spoke quietly, like they were planning something. He kept glancing at the clock. Then he left before you arrived. "Did she look nervous?" I pressed. Farouk nodded slowly. "Not nervous. Prepared." Prepared. The word landed like a hammer. I thanked him, sliding an envelope of cash across the desk. "Keep this between us, and if you ever see him again, call me first." The second ally I sought was a private investigator, an old acquaintance named Salim, who owed me a favor. We met in a dingy tea house, the kind of place where secrets were cheaper than the chai. "I need everything on this man," I told him, handing over the fiancé's name, where he's from, who he's hurt, what skeletons he's buried. Dig deep. Salim smirked. "Sounds dirty already. Give me a week." "You have 3 days," I said, my voice cold. "Time isn't a luxury I can afford." Back at home, I resumed my role as the ailing father. My daughter urged me to rest, her fiancé visiting more often now, his smile too smooth, his handshake lingering just a little too long. At dinner one evening, he leaned toward me. "Uncle, have you thought about the future? About putting things in order? It's always best to handle transfers while you still can." I feigned a wheeze, chuckling softly. "You're right. Perhaps we should talk about that soon." His eyes gleamed, just for a second, before he hid it with false sympathy. I excused myself early from the table, staggering to my room, shutting the door. Behind it, I let my spine straighten, my breath steady. They thought the poison was working, that my days were numbered, but in truth, I was counting down theirs. 3 nights later, the investigator calls with chilling news. The fiancé's past is stained with death. An older man, another inheritance, and a case that was quietly buried. Salim's voice echoed in my ear late that night, carrying a weight that chilled me. "Your daughter's fiancé isn't new to this game," he said. 5 years ago, an elderly businessman collapsed suddenly. Poison in his system. Never proven, never pursued. The man's property ended up in the fiancé's hands through the woman he was engaged to at the time. That woman vanished after the funeral. I gripped the receiver tighter. Vanished? Left the country, some say. Others think she never made it out alive. The line crackled, then went dead. I sat in silence, the shadows of my room pressing close. The poison in my veins wasn't just an attempt. It was a signature. My daughter had no idea she'd aligned herself with a man who had perfected the art of betrayal. The next morning, he arrived earlier than usual, carrying flowers in one hand and a briefcase in the other. His smile was wide, but his eyes darted like a fox searching for traps. "Uncle," he greeted, placing the bouquet on the table. "You're looking stronger today." I gave him a slow, raspy laugh. Appearances deceive. He didn't laugh. Instead, he leaned closer. "We should really discuss your estate. If something happens suddenly, your daughter might be left struggling with lawyers, court cases, delays. Why not make it simple?" My daughter, standing behind him, shifted uncomfortably. "He's tired. This isn't the time." But he ignored her. "Think about it, Uncle. A signature here, a transfer there. You'd have peace of mind." His words were smooth, but his patience was cracking. I could see the faint twitch in his jaw. the flicker of irritation when I smiled instead of answering. Later that evening, I overheard them in the garden. His voice, sharp and low. "You said he was fading. He doesn't look like a man near death. Are you sure the dosage is right?" Her reply was muffled, trembling. I don't know. Maybe he's stronger than we thought, but I don't want to push him too far." I stepped back into the shadows before they saw me. That was the first time I sensed her doubt. The mask was slipping, not just his, but hers, too. That night, as I sat at my desk pretending to write letters, a folded slip of paper slid under my door. I froze, staring at the neat handwriting. "Father, trust me. I will explain soon." I read it 3 times, my pulse quickening. Was this guilt speaking, or a trap set by him, using her hand? The double game was twisting into something more dangerous. The father wakes the next morning to find a new will draft on the dining table, prepared by the fiancé himself, demanding a signature. The daughter's eyes plead with him silently, torn between loyalty and fear. The morning sun filtered through the dining room curtains, soft gold spilling across the polished wood table. At first I thought the papers waiting there were harmless, receipts perhaps, or an old letter misplaced. But when I sat down, the weight of what I saw pressed the air from my lungs. A new will, drafted neatly, my signature line already marked with a crimson tab. He sat opposite me, his posture too relaxed, his confidence bordering on arrogance. My daughter hovered nearby, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't yet name, fear or shame or both. "Uncle," he began, his voice a silk thread pulling tighter, "this is nothing more than formality. You'll still have control while you live. But if anything happens suddenly, everything will pass seamlessly to your daughter. Isn't that what you want?" I let my fingers graze the fountain pen beside the document. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Seamlessly to my daughter? Or seamlessly into his grip? "I built this home," I said slowly. "These walls have heard my laughter, my tears, my losses. And you think ink on paper will decide who owns my soul when I'm gone?" His smile faltered for the first time. "It isn't about soul, Uncle. It's about protection." My daughter's voice cracked as she cut in. "Please, just sign it. It will end all arguments." Her words pierced deeper than any poison. I turned to her, searching her face for the daughter who once clung to my hand at crowded markets, who once whispered secrets to me under the blanket of night. All I saw was hesitation. Her loyalty tugged in 2 directions. "You ask me to surrender," I whispered. "To you? Or to him?" She flinched. Her lips moved as if to speak, but no words came. The air thickened. I could almost hear the slow drip of poison echoing from that restaurant night. My chest ached, not from what was in my blood, but from the crack widening between us. His sekekset lid the will closer, tapping the pen against it with forced patience. "Time is precious, Uncle. Why delay the inevitable?" My hand trembled over the page, but not with weakness. With rage I could no longer disguise. I pushed the papers back across the table. "If my bloodline means only ink to you, then you underestimate me." For the first time, his mask slipped completely. His jaw clenched, his eyes hardened into steel. He leaned in, his voice a whisper sharpened by venom. "Then perhaps ink won't be necessary. There are other ways." The silence that followed was suffocating. My daughter grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. "Enough. Not here. Not now." Her plea was the first sign, small but undeniable, that the chain binding her to him was cracking. But as I left the table, heart pounding, one truth seared into me. The bond I thought unbreakable between father and daughter was now fractured. and fractured bonds bleed the deepest. That evening, the father discovers his daughter secretly slipping out to meet the fiancé. He follows and overhears a conversation that changes everything. The fiancé is planning to accelerate his scheme, while the daughter's trembling voice reveals she may not be as complicit as he feared. The night had a strange stillness, the kind that makes every sound louder, sharper. I stayed in the shadows by the veranda, watching my daughter slip quietly through the gate. Her shawl barely brushed the iron bars as she closed it behind her. No words, no glance back. Just hurried steps swallowed by the darkness. I waited a moment, then followed. My pulse pounded in rhythm with my footsteps, each one slower, quieter than the last. The city had its own theater of lies, streets whispering promises, shadows staging silent plays. And tonight, I was both actor and audience. She didn't go far. Just 3 streets down, she stopped at a dimly lit corner cafe, the type where secrets felt at home. He was already there, leaning against the wall like a man rehearsing confidence. I ducked behind a parked car, my breath fogging the glass. "You push him too hard," she whispered urgently, her arms crossed against video speech AI generated. "Please use at your discretion." Input text. Upload files. My creations. Convert your text into audio files, supporting multiple languages and capable of reading various text files such as books and documents. Download the audio files for commercial use. Selection deleted. Chill. He's suspicious. I can see it in his eyes. His chuckle was cold, rehearsed. Suspicion doesn't matter if we control the ending. You heard Salim at the door, didn't you? He's just a nosy guard, easily bought, easily silenced. Her shoulders stiffened. Don't talk like that. He's loyal to my father. He stepped closer, tilting her chin upward with a hand that looked more like a vice than a caress. And you? Loyal to him? Or to us? Her silence was answer enough. I clenched my fists. Every gesture, every word he spoke was theater. He wore charm like a costume, slipping it on when needed, discarding it when no one was watching. My daughter was trapped in his script, playing. He's a role she hadn't fully chosen. Tomorrow, he said finally, his voice dropping low. We try again. The dosage will be stronger. He won't resist twice. My stomach turned to ice. Stronger. He hadn't given up. He was accelerating, and then her voice trembled, breaking the script. What if I tell him? What if I warn him? He's my father. I can't just watch. The mask slipped. His hand tightened around her wrist, his words now daggers. If you ruin this, you'll regret it more than you imagine. Remember, blood isn't always thicker than survival. I saw tears glint in her eyes, caught in the pale glow of the cafe light. My chest ached, but I stayed silent, chained to the shadows. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. My daughter wasn't the enemy. She was the stage. And he, the fiancé, was the playwright, scripting tragedy for us all. I turned away, retreating into the night. My plan for revenge was no longer about protection alone. It was about rewriting the play, seizing control of the theater before the final act consumed us all. The father returns home and begins preparing a trap, an elaborate stage where he will let the fiancé believe his plan is working while secretly pulling the strings. But when he finds another anonymous note slipped under his door, signed only with an initial, it raises the question, who else is watching? The night pressed heavy on my chest as I slipped back into the house. My footsteps were slow, deliberate, as though the walls themselves were listening. What I had seen, my daughter trembling, my would-be son-in-law plotting, was enough to set my blood boiling. But anger without evidence is a fire that burns the wrong hands. I needed proof. In my study, the air smelled faintly of dust and ink. I lit a single lamp, its glow throwing long shadows across the shelves. I pulled open drawers, rifled through files, searching for something, anything, that could expose him for what he was. Hours seemed to blur together. Then, as I tugged at the bottom panel of an old oak cabinet, something shifted. A hollow click. My breath caught. I pried the wood loose and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book. Its surface was cracked, its edges darkened with time. A ledger. My hands trembled as I opened it. Names, dates, amounts. Beside each entry, notes scribbled in neat, calculated handwriting. Sale completed after sudden collapse. Property signed over by widow coerced. Inheritance transferred after dispute settled. My stomach turned. Page after page, the same pattern. Victims who had fallen, families broken, fortunes siphoned away. The ledger wasn't just a record. It was a map of his crimes. And then, my eyes froze. My daughter's name. Written beside it, target secured, estate pending. Ensure full compliance. The ink was fresh. My throat tightened, bile rising. He had catalogued her as nothing more than an acquisition, another conquest on a long list of stolen lives. The rage that surged through me was no longer a fire. It was ice, cold, sharp, unforgiving. I slammed the book shut and gripped it to my chest. My revenge was no longer a question of survival. It was justice for the dead and the living. But before I could plan my next move, a sound echoed through the hallway. A soft creak, the hush of footsteps. I killed the lamp and pressed myself against the wall. The ledger clutched tight. The door cracked open. A shadow slipped inside. Not him. My daughter. Her eyes widened when she saw me in the dark, and then they dropped to the ledger in my hand. "You found it," she whispered. Her voice was not surprised, not horrified, just resigned. I stepped forward, my voice low and shaking. "You knew?" She lowered her gaze, tears glistening. "I didn't know how to tell you. He keeps everything in that book. I was trying to find it before he noticed, before it was too late." The silence between us was a chasm. For the first time in weeks, I saw my daughter not as a traitor, but as a prisoner, caught in the chains of his lies, too terrified to speak. I pulled her into the room, shut the door, and whispered, "Then listen carefully. If we are to survive this, we must rewrite his story before he writes the end of ours." As father and daughter begin planning their counterattack, the fiancé suddenly confronts them in the study, smiling, asking why they are awake so late. The ledger is still on the desk, half hidden, its pages threatening to expose everything. The door creaked wider, and his silhouette filled the frame, calm, composed, smiling, that same serpent smile I had grown to despise. "Awake at this hour?" he asked lightly, stepping into the room. His gaze swept lazily across the study, the shelves, the papers on my desk, the faint glow of the dying lamp. Then his eyes lingered. Too long, too sharp. On the ledger. I slid my hand across it, masking the movement as a casual stretch. My pulse thundered. "Father couldn't sleep," my daughter said quickly, her voice trembling but steady enough to pass as truth. "We were just talking." He studied her, his smile never faltering, but his eyes betrayed suspicion. He stepped closer, his fingers brushing her arm in a gesture that looked tender but felt like a leash. "You worry too much, darling," he whispered. Then, turning to me, "Uncle, perhaps you should let me make you something warm. Tea, maybe, for your nerves." The words hung in the air like a noose. Tea. His favorite stage for poison. I forced a chuckle. No need. My heart is stronger than it looks. Is it? His smile widened. Hearts are fragile things. Sometimes they betray us long before we're ready. His hand lingered over his pocket, and I caught the faint outline of a small vial pressing against the fabric. My daughter saw it too. Her face paled. I met her gaze. In that moment, we spoke without words. The poison was no longer just liquid in a vial. It was trust, corroded, love, twisted, fear, weaponized. He leaned against the desk, inches from the ledger I shielded. His voice dropped, smooth as venom. Tell me, Uncle, if your heart stopped tonight, what would you regret most? Leaving your estate unguarded, or leaving your daughter unprotected? I stared back, my jaw tight. My greatest regret, I said slowly, would be allowing snakes to nest in my home. For the first time, his smile broke. A flicker. Brief, but enough. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the vial. Clear liquid glistened inside. He placed it on the desk, its presence louder than any shout. Tomorrow, he said softly, everything changes. You'll see. He turned to leave, but just before he reached the door, my daughter whispered, almost too faint to hear, "If tomorrow comes?" He stopped. His shoulders stiffened, then relaxed. Without another word, he left, the door closing behind him like a curtain at the end of an act. I finally exhaled, clutching the ledger, my daughter's hand trembling in mine. The poison was in our drinks, yes, but it was also in our hearts, and one of them would stop beating before this play reached its final scene. Cliffhanger into Chapter 12. The father decides to turn the fiancé's weapon against him. With the ledger as bait and the poison as the trap, he begins setting the stage for the ultimate confrontation. But the cost will demand more than he expects. The house felt like a theater waiting for its final curtain call. Every corridor whispered with tension. Every lamp flickered like a spotlight on the stage. The vial sat on my desk, gleaming faintly in the low light, daring me to choose how this story would end. I turned to my daughter. Her eyes were swollen, her lips pressed tight. She had seen the worst of him, and perhaps the worst of herself, for silence is also a crime when lives are at stake. Tomorrow, I said, echoing his words, we write the last chapter. We spent the night in silence, planning without speaking. She stayed by my side, her hand resting near the ledger as though guarding not just the book, but me as well. By morning, the table was set. Teacups placed neatly, the ledger open as bait. The poison vial, emptied into one of the cups, waited like a coiled snake. He arrived, punctual as ever, dressed in charm and confidence. His eyes flicked to the ledger first, then to me, then to the tea steaming between us. "Ah," he said, smiling. "You've come around. A signature and a sip. 2 small acts, and all disputes are gone." I gestured to the chair. "Sit. Let us settle this as men do, face to face." He lowered himself, his smile unwavering. My daughter sat beside me, her knuckles white against the cup she refused to touch. He lifted his. "To family," he toasted. I raised mine, though I did not drink. I watched his lips curve against the porcelain, watched the first swallow slide down his throat. For a moment, nothing. Then, a flicker of confusion. His smile faltered. His hand clutched the table edge. His voice rasped. "You!" I leaned forward, my words cold as stone. "To snakes in my garden. May they choke on their own venom." The cup slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. He gasped, tried to rise, but his body betrayed him, folding like a marionette with its strings cut. Silence. Only the clock ticked, marking the final seconds of a man who had thought himself untouchable. My daughter buried her face in her hands, sobs breaking free. I touched her shoulder, but my own chest felt hollow, emptied by what justice demanded. We had survived. But survival is not victory. The ledger lay open, its pages stained with names, lives consumed by greed. I struck a match, held it steady, then dropped it onto the paper. Flames devoured the record of his sins, curling the edges into ash. "Why burn it?" she asked through tears. "Because vengeance is mine," I said softly, "but his crimes should not bind us forever." The fire spread, consuming not just the ledger, but the remnants of my own rage. When it died down, only ashes remained, drifting across the desk like the inheritance he had sought but never earned. My daughter clung to me, whispering apologies I could barely bear to hear. I held her close, though part of me feared I had already lost her long before this night. We were free, but freedom came at the cost of innocence, of trust, of peace. And as dawn broke through the windows, painting the room in fragile light, I realized the truth. Revenge gives no heirs, only ashes. The story closes with moral ambiguity. The father victorious but scarred, the daughter broken but spared, the inheritance reduced to ashes instead of wealth. The audience is left to question, was justice worth the price?